All right, our next topic for discussion are some additional important HTML tags. Basically list tags, and there's 3 different categories for them, and we're going to walk through each one in sequence. The first one that we're going to look at is what we call an unordered list. So I'm going to create a new section of my page here. I'm actually going to add a line break or 2 there. And the core tag for an unordered list is UL. So this one's kind of like a shortened acronym thing. And within a UL, you typically have list items. And you open them and you close them just like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these. I'm going to get a few of them in here. So right now it's kind of a blank structure. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back over to the browser and just take a really quick look. In fact, if I was really more enterprising, I could probably split screen this for you guys. All right. So there's our unordered list. And if you scroll down on the page here, oh, I got to refresh. Okay. All right. That's an unordered list. All right, that's just things, like it's a bullet list, right? The one thing that you should notice, though, if you look up at the paragraphs are basically right up against the side of the window, right? The block quotes are indented, so are the list items. But the list items are preceded by some sort of indicator that they're an unordered list. Now, another type of list item is what we call the ordered list, and you can see I'm just copying what I have here, and I'm just going to change the encapsulating tag to OL, stands for ordered list, and then when I come back to the browser here and reload, scroll down, same list, but this time it's numbered. So I'm sure you can see how that could be handy. Another type of list is what we call a description list. Now, description list is a little bit different than the other 2 because it actually has 3 different elements that we're working with in the list structure. So the encapsulating tag is DL, to stay with the convention. And then instead of having list items, we have 2 other structures. We have DTs, DTs basically stands for, well, probably the proper way to do it is to follow what it means. Definition list, this would be the definition term, so maybe, here, let's define what packers are. And then one more layer deep, we have DD, sorry, Bears fans. See, down in the counties in this part of Wisconsin, we're so close to Chicago, we have a high percentage of Bears fans. We'll fix that. The definition itself. The technical term for it is, I guess I don't have a technical term for it that I can see. I would call it the description definition. if you want to give it a name. And then what I was about to do here is I was going to replicate that so you can see what it looks like when it's rendered in the browser. Gotta have a little fun. So I'm back over in the browser. I'm going to refresh. And you can take a look at how it lays out. So kind of a little different than the unordered list and the ordered list. And it does create this like natural little hierarchy, which I think can be pretty useful. Creates some indents. It kind of creates like a little title thing. Organizes it. Now, in terms of how you use this stuff, there's a lot of different things you can do with lists. For example, with the unordered list, when we get into like CSS and stuff, you'll discover that you can actually style these bullets, or you can replace them with graphics, or you can make them disappear. Or with the numbered ones, you can substitute letters, symbols, you can make the numbers go backwards, and all sorts of like weird stuff like that. Typically, they're used in their native format, but one thing that's very important about unordered lists is in the early days of HTML, that was the structure that held navigation. So we'd have pages, so instead of seeing like thing 1, thing 2, you would have links here, and that would point you to either other parts of the page or to different pages. Now that convention stuck around so long that people still use unordered lists for navigation and style it to make it not look like a list. And I have thoughts, both pro and con on that. But that's one of the important features of an unordered list is that it is used for navigation. All right, next thing we're going to look at are special characters. So in order to do this part, I'm actually going to create a new section of the page here. Oops, see I broke a tag, see how the color coding shows me that? Yeah. That's why I want a good editor, because otherwise you miss those things. You're like, why isn't it working? It was working before. I didn't do anything. Yes, I did. I hit delete or something by mistake. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create a paragraph tag. Where's my Donald Trump text here? Let's just copy some of that. Actually, we should be fair and throw Hillary in the mix, right? I'm not commenting on politics, I'm just saying. Pulling the slides back over. And the slide that I'm working on right now is a special character slide. And you can see that there's some weird characters that you try to put up on the screen that don't render on their own, technically. Now, this one's kind of neat. Let's do that one. In fact, I'm going to make a new paragraph for that one. And this tag is and, C-O-P-Y, semicolon. It's not, okay, technically it's not a tag. Okay, it's a special character. And you already saw what it does. Let's bring up the browser again and refresh and scroll down. It inserts the copyright symbol. You know why we need that special character? Because it's not anywhere on the keyboard. So how do we generate it? Okay, here's the other thing. Why on earth in the PowerPoint do they have a special character for greater than and less than? It's right there on the keyboard. Yeah, you guys are thinking the right way. Well, that, they're used for tags, so how do you display the bracket? So here's even a better question. How do I show HTML on my page when I'm writing it in HTML? Yeah, you already know the answer to that one, Alex, but yeah, there's techniques for that too. But this is a special character. Another thing that we were looking at before is, remember I put in extra spaces and they didn't show up? It just renders one space. But what if I do want extra spaces in there? One that they're not showing in that character list is this one, and I would argue is probably the most important one. It's called non-breaking space, NBSP, semicolon. So watch what happens with this one. And I'm going to replicate it a couple of times. And actually, I'm actually going to yank it out of this spot. So you see that I put in regular spaces, you'll see they do nothing. And then inside this quote here, I'm going to paste this a whole bunch of times. Each one of those is one space. So when I save it and refresh, remember up here I added a whole bunch, they did nothing. Down here I put in the non-breaking spaces, and I put them in. So if you need to force in spaces, that's the way you do it. If you're doing it for layout reasons, though, I always caution you, there's better ways to do it with CSS. You don't have to write really quirky HTML to get something to look some way. There's always a CSS way to make it, and it's a better approach. All right. So I think you get the point there. Let's pull this back up out of the way. All right, so far we learned a lot of the basics. Believe it or not, these are the most commonly used tags when you're creating web pages. Well, there's going to be more that you're going to learn, but there's a couple of important ones that we're going to throw into the mix now. And some of the HTML tags that we use kind of have predefined meaning and styles. You guys see, like, the heading tags are bigger, right? And the paragraphs obviously hold a paragraph, or should hold a paragraph. But what if you want to create something that really doesn't fit into any one of those categories, and more importantly, is really kind of a blank slate and doesn't have any of the pre-built structures that come with it. So in other words, I don't want it to be bold. I don't want it to put in an extra line break. I don't want it indented. I just want something that's going to hold something for me. Well, they have a tag for that called the div tag. And what the div tag is, technically, is a generic block level element, meaning it does not have any meaning. It's kind of just, it's an empty box. All right, now inside of a div, I can drop in some text like I would anything else. I'll save it, and let's do the refresh. Okay, it doesn't look any different. What if I do a few of these? Save it, back over and refresh. Now, it's kind of behaving like a paragraph, right? But notice that it's not putting the extra spaces in. In fact, what's cool about a div is it doesn't have any styles. So very often what we do with divs is we'll use them just to encapsulate content, to just kind of order it together, or to apply an attribute like an ID, and we give it a name of some sort. And then by giving it a name, it allows us to act upon it with JavaScript and style it with CSS. Because we have a named construct, then we can do stuff with it. Also, because the div is a block level element, and once again, even though there's no stuff over here, this div is filling the whole width of the screen. But it's a block level element that does not have any styles attached to it. And from a design standpoint, that's a blank canvas. That means you can do anything you want with it. You're not fighting the pre-built styles that come with. So for a long time, this was kind of like the de facto choice for people trying to control layout on a page, because it didn't have styles. But divs can be used in a lot of different ways. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull the slideshow back over, bring it full screen, and I want you to take a look at what they're doing here. What they're doing is we're stepping past all the basic tags now and looking more towards actual page structure. And if you take a look at the structure that we have here, this is a pretty common layout for a web page. So we have a header area for a logo up there, right? Maybe a tagline or something like that. Then we'll usually have navigation underneath it. Home, about, contact us, gallery, stuff that we should put on a web page. And we're used to it going across the screen. And then we'll have a main content area of the page. And then we might have little containers for other sorts of content. And at the bottom of the page we have a footer. In days of old, the way that we would accomplish that is we would create divs, and I would call one header. And then we'd call a different one nav, and they call a different one main, and a different one footer. You get the point, right? So what they ended up doing with HTML5 is when they were writing standard, they were like, well, wouldn't it be just smarter if everybody goes div ID header? Why don't we just make a tag called header and be done with it? So that's what they did. And it makes a lot more sense. And the really important part of that is HTML5 is what we call the semantic web. What does the word semantic mean? Google? Make a new tab. What does semantic mean? Well, Google says, relating to the meaning in language or logic. So we're creating tags that hold meaning, that even if you don't know much about HTML, you should be able to look at that tag and go, ah, this is the header. Ah, this is the footer. It just makes sense is the point. And one thing that you guys are going to learn here is that semantic web is a very important concept. And what we try to do these days when we create web pages is we are trying to remove function and styling from our documents. We want the documents just to have a structure and the content. And that's a really important concept. In the past, we would throw the styling in there, the scripts in there, and in some cases you still do. But the ideal is the HTML document holds the structure and the content. That's the ideal. So if you remember that, that'll really help you a lot. The semantic web starts to name things what they are. Very typical page structure, and the reason they show you this is, probably like 90% of the world's websites are kind of in this format somehow, by intent or by accident. So, you know what? If you build a website that fits into this kind of structure, it'll probably look pretty good. Because people are used to convention. They're used to certain things being in certain spots. When I learned how to code web pages, and we did something other than plain old HTML, the navigation was never at the top. Oh my God, it was always on the left. Right? I'm being very dramatic about it. Oh my God. But that's how we did it. We thought putting navigation up across the top was silly. Now you go to Blackboard, right? It's got navigation on the top, it's got navigation on the sides, it's got navigations everywhere. Right? So now, though, really the convention is horizontal across the top. The other thing that you should notice, too, about HTML page structure is, once again, we really have kind of a mimic of the print publishing world. Right? Think of a newspaper. It's got a title, it's got a heading, maybe a little bit of information. It might have a little thing that says, sports, this, weather, that, like little blurbs up at the top, kind of like navigation, and then it'll have the main content area, and there'll be a heading, and stuff is usually put into narrow columns and separated. So this is the pattern of page development, and there's a reason why we call it web pages. So that's the generic basic structure that we work with these days. Now I'm going to bring up the next slide too, because I think this helps. Now if you start seeing those tags in action, we're going to start to structure our pages in this fashion. And it's a really good technique to get into, or practice to get into, that you set up your documents this way, especially if you want to follow that generic convention. Conventions are conventions for a reason, right? Because they work. We wouldn't push people to do them if they were done. I mean, it's been, good, kind of pushing on 30 years of doing HTML now, right? You guys probably aren't aware of that. 20 years for the public web, really, but it's been around for a long time. So they've kind of worked out ways that actually work. So this is a structure that you can follow. And in fact, if you wanted, you could probably just take this whole little area here, right? Is this cheating? No. I'm just going to make a new document while I'm at it and see if you guys can help me. What do I put first? Doc type, HTML. And then we have HTML tags. I'll close it. Open, close it right away. Trust me, it works. The one part that they didn't have in their document is they didn't have the head section, right? But they did give us the body section, right? So here, right off the bat, I have a whole structure. You can see I'm indenting. And let's go full screen with that. So get the point here? In fact, if you really want to do a smart thing, try a couple little tricks here. All right, now I have to type slow because I missed that 3 times in a row. Also should put my meta tag in there, right? Probably should do this too. Book says we should. Teacher says it's not important. Listen to your book. Where? Yeah, well, that's the land we're in. Wait, no, that's America. All right. So here, what we have created really is kind of a skeleton structure that you could save in this format, and then whenever you create a new page from scratch, you just open this, save as, and you got a good portion of the work already going for you, right? All right, so this is an important technique to learn. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and save it as a page template .html. So you don't have to do that, but that's just a suggestion. I mean, if you're forgetting how it goes, get it right once and replicate it. Most good editors that do HTML, you'll go to create new HTML file, click the button, and it does this for you. Well, actually, it typically won't do this part, but it'll do all the rest. So if you wanted to save a template with these things or without those things, either way is fine. But then you have a basic page template that you can work from. All right, now let's get to what makes the web cool. Do you know what makes the web cool? The ability to go somewhere else. Well, that's part of it, but I'm going to work off of some of the stuff I already have here. All right, who should we pick on? Trump? Well, okay, let's pick on Hillary. Let's create a new paragraph. And I'm just going to go out and grab some content on Hillary. All right. Like I said, no political commentary here. I'm not trying to promote any candidate. I think they're all terrible. I think a lot of people agree. Vote for Frank Zappa. Only old people laugh at that one. That used to be the cool thing to say. My browser is not cooperating here. I can't even select text right now. Can you see that? Unless this website's keeping me from selecting text. So let's go back to the British newspapers. I don't know why that would be the case. I think my browser is just operating very slowly. The Hillary haters, there we go. Wait, that's the video. No, stop. All right, sorry, Donald, but we're using you again. This is going so slow, I want to actually pause the video to try to figure out why. This is to the point of ridiculous. Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. Especially when you know how much bandwidth Gateway has. All right. We're just going to kill the browser. All right, Microsoft Edge, here's your chance to make yourself known. That's my machine's running slow. All right, I'm pausing my video. All right, folks, so I had paused the video and I'm just starting it back up because I realized I hadn't unpaused it. But we're trying to be kind of humorous with this. And our point is basically I'm getting some text, this time about Hillary, and I'm going to basically create a link, right? So we're going to learn about what we call anchor tags. Anchor tags are tags whose tag is A. I mean, that's an anchor tag, is an A. But an anchor tag very rarely sits on its own like that. So we will have an opening and closing, but anchor tags power really comes in one of its important attributes, and that is the href attribute. So href basically refers to hypertext reference, and that is where we could paste a link. So what I did while the video was paused is I went to the Donald Trump website. So I'm dropping in a link to his website, but I'm wrapping it around Hillary's name. And just to be fair, I should probably do the converse, right? This is America, after all. We can mess up people equally in both directions. All right. But notice what's happening though. Anchor tag wraps around a piece of text. So the stuff that's going to sit inside this anchor tag is what is going to be the linkable item. All right, so once again, we have the anchor tag inside that anchor tag, so you can see the closing part of it here. We added an attribute called href equals, and then inside quotes, instead of double quotes, the link to the item that we're going to. In this case, it's a full web address. So it's going to a different website. So I'm going to save this, and because I closed my browser before, I'm going to have to go locate my page to open it. Or, what I was showing you in the previous video or two, if you're in Notepad++, if you click the Run menu, and I guess I'm going to stick with, what browser am I using? Let's use Chrome. See how that works? It's kind of slick. And then if I scroll down, here's what the link looks like. You guys should be used to this now. One thing you should notice is when you wrap the anchor tag around text, it automatically styles it. It turns it blue, and it underlines it. In addition, when you hover over it, the pointer changes to indicate that it's clickable. If you look at the very bottom of my window down here, as I hover, it shows you the link that you're going to. I'm going to click it, and as I click it, it should take me to this guy's website. I have to make fun of all of them. It's just ridiculous. All right. Stop making America great. All right. So now notice that in the aftermath, of course, after we visited the link, the default behavior is that it changes color. So it keeps track. All right. So that's an anchor tag. Now anchor tags can be used in a couple of different ways. Another way that we can use an anchor tag is we can do something like this, and you may have seen this on some websites, so I'm going to kind of do it here as well. I'm just going to create a quick paragraph, and then I'm going to put in an anchor tag with an href again, and this time I'm going to do $top, and I'm going to put in some text back to top of the page, or something like that. Now right away you guys should recognize that this text here is going to be a link, right? And you should also notice I didn't close my paragraph, very bad. But this is my URL. I don't know of any web pages that are called $top. This is what we call an in-page anchor. The one that's specified as top is built into the browser. So we don't have to code it. So as soon as I save it, I go back to the browser, I do my refresh, maybe make my font a little smaller here, and I click on it, takes me right back up to the top of the page. Pretty cool, right? But what if you're at the top of the page, you guys guess what I was going to do? All right, but this time we're going to go back to Hillary, and I'm going to actually get rid of the top part, but I got to do something first. I'm going to come way back down here, and I'm actually going to insert an anchor tag right here. Excuse me. And I'm going to add to that anchor tag an attribute called name, and let's call it Hillary. Oops. And I'm going to wrap that around Trump. And actually, the truth is, I don't even need to wrap it. You guys catching this? I'm going to save this. So I have a named anchor at the bottom of the page, near the bottom of the page. I have a link up at the top with the $, but now I'm going to add Hillary to it. So when I click this link, you guys have already guessed. Let's do a refresh. Now that's not really the best of examples because where this is located, it should take me to this spot. Right? So Trump also said Republicans, and it tries to put this at the top of the document. The problem is that our document was so long, or the view was so long, that when I hit it, it's not really showing it correctly. When it works as it should, because really, my point is, I guess if the window was really small like this, it would work. But if I put that anchor somewhere else, let's put it somewhere else. You'll get a better idea of how that goes. Let's put it right by, let's put it right here. See what it does? It puts us right, that named anchor is right here. So it takes wherever you are and puts it there. Now that can be useful if you have a page that's super, super long, and sometimes you see those, and then up at the top you'll have like, go to the section on this, and you click on it, and it takes you right to that spot. That's called an in-page anchor. All right, so we saw one that's in-page. We saw the built-in default for top. We also saw an external link. There's one other type that you guys need to learn about. But this is going to require a little bit of work. First thing I'm doing is I'm looking where I stored this page. See what this page is called? Page template HTML, right? And this one's called index.html. If I go to my file folder, where I'm storing this stuff, both those pages are in the same folder. So I'm going to go back to my HTML document here, and I'm just going to create another paragraph. I'm going to create another anchor tag, another link, basically. And this time I'm going to go to page template.html. Close my paragraph, close my anchor. I'm going to save it. Now, we know that this is an in-page anchor when we see the pound sign. We know that this takes us to an external web page just like it would in a browser. But this other one will take us to another page in the same folder. So when I save this and render it, so I'm refreshing, and then I click template, it takes me to the other document I created. And hopefully it's working for you too. All right. Now, this can get a little bit more complicated, and we'll talk about it as the weeks come forward. But sometimes when you work within a folder structure for a website, sometimes you have folders inside your folders. And in that case, if I had a folder that was called templates, and that file was not in the same folder as index, but was in the same folder with, or in this other folder called templates, this is how I would get to it. I would add the folder name to the front of it. Yes, it's relative to the location of the document you're currently in. That's very good distinction. So I'm not going to throw too much of this at you at once because it is an important skill to know how to link from document to document and then navigate through a local file structure using this approach. If you guys, for any reason, are creating any sorts of pages where you're seeing something like file, colon, / C, colon, / yada, 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 you got problems. If you're pointing to an external website and you see the HTTP, that's fine. If you see in-page anchor, that's fine. If you see a folder and file listing, that's fine. But whenever you see that file thing at the beginning, you got problems. So just meaning when you move it off of your machine, it's not going to work. All right, we're getting close to the end of chapter 2 now. Let's throw another one in there. Let's put this near the bottom. And we'll create another paragraph. I'm just sticking with paragraphs for now. I'm trying to have fun. Sometimes it doesn't work. Now you can also create a basic tag like this with a link, but watch what this one's going to do. Mail to, colon, and then some email address. And it's probably like something like that, right? We need to close our anchor tag. And so by adding this little part of it and then an email address, you have the capability, let's go back to our page and right at the bottom here, send an email to George Bush. You can see when I hover down here at the bottom, it says mail to, And then when I click that link, it will. I'm just waiting to see. Okay. So on my machine, my default mail program is Microsoft Outlook. So it brings up Microsoft Outlook, ready to send a mail. You can configure your operating system so that the default mail program is like Gmail or Yahoo. But I'm always very leery to have people use this approach on an actual web page because you cannot predict how they send email. Right? So on my machine, it could pop up in Outlook, and that's fine because I use Outlook to send mail. But what about on your machine where you don't even have a default mail client configured? So that can create a problem. So as a fail-safe, whenever you do this, send an email to George Bush, it's always good habit to also say, or provide the email address in plain text so that the user can see it on the web page just in case they do not have a default mail client configured. And this is a very primitive, ugly-looking example, but you get the point, right? So be careful with that one and use it selectively. Yes. And see, the problem, with me for Outlook is I have more than one account set up. When I was running my businesses and my consulting and all that stuff, I would have like 15 different email accounts running off of Outlook. I was like, which one am I sending from? Oh, I forget. And although that seems like overkill, it really does make a lot of sense. Like, for example, you guys, whenever you do school stuff, you should use your gateway email. Whenever you do personal stuff, don't do it through your gateway email. Why? Because Gateway can look at anything in there. So can Google. Separate your stuff. All right. Home stretch here on the book material. So I'm actually going to bring the slideshow back over. One thing that we're going to practice here in just a little bit is this whole concept of linking between pages within a site. So we're just going to kind of goof around with that. And what they're showing us here is kind of what I would call super rudimentary page hierarchy, right? So if you think about it, when you have a website, you have a home page. It's the page you land on. It's your index.html. But very often you have other pages. And you can draw that out in a hierarchy like this. Sometimes all those files sit in the same folder. Sometimes we break them down into separate folders. It really kind of depends on the situation. Typically, if you're creating a small website, like most of the ones you're going to be doing in this course, most of the HTML files can all be in the same folder. Okay? But when you start to build really big, complex sites, it's not going to be like that. The only HTML file that might be in the root might only be HTML or index.html. And then you'll break things down in content and images and scripts and categories, under each one. But knowing how to traverse that structure with hyperlinks is important. I'm not going to include it in this video. I'm actually, when we end this video, we'll take a break, come back, and do some of that, so you get a little practice with it. And we're just at the end here. I'm trying to see if there's anything. This is one thing I did want to cover. And I have that as one of my bullet points in the unit folder. That how do you know the code you're writing is valid? Right? Because I've already told you if it's not right, you start to throw in that CSS, you throw in that JavaScript, and things break in a horrible fashion. And the way that you make sure you have valid code is either you can use a tool like Notepad++ that color codes, and it gives you a little bit of a clue. Or you can have a tool like Visual Studio, which actually will do on-the-fly debugging. So we'll say missing paragraph tag right here. Even point out the spot for you. Highlight the line. But if you don't have those tools, you do have this thing here from W3 Schools where they have a validator that's online. All right, so note the URL. So it's just validator.w3.org. if you don't remember the URL, if you just like type in like validate HTML, this will be the first thing that comes up. A lot of software programs, Dreamweaver is one of them, has built-in validation. It just goes to this site and runs it and sends it back. That's all it does. Right? I mean, if you're going to validate, you validate with the official source. So basically what you can do here is you can actually either drop in a link to your stuff, you can upload the file directly, or usually what I prefer to do is I just go to my code, click in there, Control A, highlights everything, Option A on the Mac, copy, back over, paste it in, hit the button. My code's going to be perfect, right? We'll find out. Oops. Warning, the name attribute is obsolete. Okay, oops. But it still works. Error, start tag A scene, but an element of the same type was already open. Oops. All right. Error, end tag A violates nesting rules. I didn't nest it properly? You see what this gives you, right? Because guess what I'm going to do when I look at your code? I might. Sometimes I can just look at it and know pretty quickly. But what you should get into the habit of doing is always creating documents that are valid. And not for the sake of passing this thing, but for the sake of having your pages work right when you do higher level things. Because if your code's not valid, you can run into all sorts of issues. And one of the first troubleshooting rules I teach people is that your CSS isn't working or your JavaScript's not working, you go to your HTML and make sure your structure is right first. Because you can sit there for days playing with your CSS and it won't fix a thing if your structure's not right. Now, the other thing that I want to point out is that when you're looking to fix the problems, don't start with the last error. Start with the first error. Because you know what happens? The first error can generate a whole bunch of others. So the problem here might just be the first one. Now notice what it does. It says, the name attribute is obsolete. Consider putting an ID attribute on the nearest container instead. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my code. I'm going to do a Control F and just type name. There it is. So what they're telling me is, instead of doing this, delete that. And then right here, instead, give it an ID equals Hillary. Yeah. Don't ever question the t-shirt. I'm just putting an ID on a nearby element, just like it told me to do. Okay? And it doesn't make sense, Hillary Packers, whatever. But in Milwaukee, it made sense because I heard a statistic that how many people watch the game versus how many people watch the debate. I was like, that's a no-brainer. Then I discovered you can actually watch the debate after the fact on Hulu, because I'm kind of new to Hulu. And I was like, oh, that's cool. All right, just in case you want to know. So I'm saving it. Once again, I'm going to Control-A, highlight all, Control-C, back over to the validator. Paste it in again, check it. See it? One fix took care of all the rest. So when you're troubleshooting your code, do not start with the top one. The top one might be causing all the rest. All right, so that's pretty helpful. The validator works for a lot of different things that you can check other file formats too, but it's really kind of handy. If you already have a website that's out there, that's mounted live on the web, I mean, you can just drop in the URL, it'll go to the site, read it, and tell you if it's good or not.
But you put an ID to pretty much any element now?
Yes. You can put an ID on pretty much any element. The only catch with an ID, and we haven't talked about this yet, is that they must be unique. I cannot have like 2 Hillary IDs on one page. But by putting an ID on it, you can anchor to it. You can navigate right to it. It's pretty cool. All right, I'm just checking the last of the slides in the PowerPoint, make sure we hit all the topics, and we did. So I'm going to end this video here. We're going to take another break, come back, and do some coding.